Well, Chevy started out as a writer. And then he kind of wormed his way into the show. And I think I was the person who made this card and put it on Lauren's board, but it could have been someone else that just said, me being funny, Chevy. Because that was kind of like a lot of what Chevy was, shtick. But it worked. It was effective. I had a complex relationship with Belushi because initially, of course, I did feel very protective of him and thought of him as this sort of sweet kind of pussycat guy that would come over to our house and hang out and not really have much to say and kind of get up and tell stories and do impressions of people, which was kind of his conversation more than regular conversation. But then Belushi got kind of adversarial about the women on the show, and I think partly because of the fact that he resented the fact that I was working with his wife and she was spending a lot of time on our project and kind of taking her focus away from him. And I think he got resentful about that. And he used to tell Lauren he should fire the girls. And he used to refuse to be in pieces that we wrote and things like that. So it became a lot more difficult and complicated. But, I think he was really a genius. Garrett had a very difficult position on the show, and I blush at some of the things that he was. I think, I feel like we owe him and probably every African American in the country an apology for making him be a flying monkey. But I think that, he was older. He kind of wanted to write, but I don't think his writing ability adapted itself well to that situation, which was true of a lot of people. You had to have a certain kind of skill or learn a certain kind of skill to write in that world, and get your stuff on. And he was, kind of isolated. So I think he had a very tough situation. And when I think of some of the stuff that he did, it's pretty amazing. That he would sing opera on live television. That's like so amazing that he could do that, Even if we did run a comedy crawl over it, which said that we had to let him do it because he had a knife. But, I was always saying to Lauren, couldn't you hire a black woman? Couldn't you get a black woman on the show so that then we could, do something more with Garrett? But that was always, Lauren, we would always dread that 3 a.m. visit from Lauren where he would come around and go, what have you got for the girls? And we would go, well, we have this, and then he'd go, can you put Garrett in it? And we'd be like, no, it's about nuns. You can't be in it. No, it's set in a women's prison. No, there's no part for Garrett. Go away. Gilda was one of those performers that had she sort of had this love me, love me, love me quality, which might not speak too well for her psychological adjustment, but I think it was very compelling. And I think that Judy Garland had that same quality. I think it was something that people really responded to, and you could definitely see that. And you could always see that in her from the moment you would see her on stage. When she was in the she wasn't in Lemmings, but she was in the National Lampoon show, which is where I first saw her do that thing where she would just smack into the wall. And you could see that, sort of her relationship to the audience of wanting them to love her, and then they did love her. And you could see also that she would kind of literally do anything for a laugh. The thing to me about Gilda is that Gilda once came to Saturday Night Live. I was working on a piece for her, something we had worked out together, which was Connie Carson, a woman who makes a living interviewing women about women, or something like that. It was, I forget the exact line. It was to who. And so I was working on it, and I was up at the office late at night, and Gilda was at home, and I was talking to her on the phone. And then she was like, well, why don't I just come in? And she did come in. And she came in her pajamas. And then she confessed that she had changed into her pajamas to come in. And that to me was Gilda, you know, that she would do that. And then she would explain the joke, you know. Well, Laraine Newman, you know, Laraine always had a little bit of a confidence problem, I think, in somewhat of the shadow of Gilda. And yet Laraine was really brilliantly funny and a wonderful creator in her own right, you know. Like, for instance, the child psychiatrist character that we did, that she came up with, basically was a character that she did, and then I said, well, we need to cast this character as a know-it-all. So who would be a know-it-all? Well, okay, a psychiatrist. So then, you know, a child psychiatrist, because who better can understand the mind of a child than another child? So I think that Laraine did have a little bit of a confidence issue. And I mean, I can remember one time when she was not well and she said she wasn't coming in or something. And I said, oh, well, you know, there was this thing you were supposed to do, but we can give it to Gilda. And she was like, okay, I'll be there in 15 minutes. But, you know, meanwhile, given the fact that I think for the first 2 years they had to share a dressing room, it's amazing that Jane, Laraine, and Gilda all, like, really loved each other and got along as well as they did, you know, and had the affection that they had for each other and cooperation with each other. I think people were happy to see Bill. I think Bill did a piece about being the new guy. You know, he did a new guy piece. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just remember that since Bill was an old friend, I mean, we were kind of happy to see Bill finally get on the show. But it may have been hard for him. I mean, I always felt that he was a little bit grateful to Rosie and me for the Todd and Lisa sketch, the nerd sketches, because that was one of the things that he kind of had as a breakout thing. And when he came and did an episode of Square Pegs for me, I always sort of felt that, you know, it was partly because of Todd.